Okay, so let's go to the next part of the lecture. So this is a part of the graph we can use, so we can see that the proportion. So what percentage was aged 18 and over in 2020? How was the proportion of the 18 or older? And what are the facts of my states and country? So in this data, maybe we can go to the Arkansas, right? We can go to Arkansas, and maybe we can go to the Arkansas. Please show us the Arkansas state. And maybe we are living in the West Jonesboro. Independent. Where are we? The Craighead County. Yes, right. So maybe you live in a different part of the Arkansas, or out of the Arkansas state. But inside of the Craighead County, percent age 18 and over 75.2%, and younger than 80 24.8. So I cannot say with a very large or something, but anyway in the middle inside of our states. And there are some more, and there are the older generation, because Izzard or the Baxter, Marion, and the Newton, there are the lower proportion of the 18 or younger, which are the younger generations. So within the state or within the county or any other states, we can see that there are very different types of the age proportion or the age structure in the population. So this is another very important figure we can see as the age dependency ratio. I will provide the calculator based on the Excel, but that will be a very easy calculation by using the Excel file or the calculator I provide in the Excel file, or you can use your calculator if you are more familiar in using the calculator. So the numerator is on the top, and this is the proportion or the number of population aged 0, the newborn baby, through 14 years old. And the proportion or the number of people over or including or over 65. So it includes the 65 years old or older, divided by the proportion or the number of the people between 15 through 64 years old, multiplied by 100 to calculate the percentage of some proportion. So the numerator will be the younger generation under 14 years old, and plus combined by the 65 years old, which are older generation, divided by or out of 15 through 64, which means they are economically or in the labor market, they are a very active group of the people. But otherwise, compared with the active group, these two groups are relatively dependent. They may depend on their economic activity or their cost of the living from those younger generation. Maybe they would live in a different family or other situation, but in terms of the country level, based on the taxation or the economic market or others, these are what we say the age dependency ratio. To calculate the proportion or proportion of the economically dependent group out of economically very active or independent group. For example, so the country A and country B, for example, the country A would have the 75% of the age dependency ratio compared with the 60% of the country B as the age dependency ratio. So this is not very realistic, but anyway, we can say that the 75% would mean the higher proportion of the 0 through 14 and the age 65 or older compared with the economically very independent group aged from 15 through 64. So you might have a question because the age 15 is not economically very active age group yet in the United States, but this is in the whole world level based on the very average level of the world. There are some countries which start their economic activity from 15 years old. So we are using this indicator, but in terms of the United States as the context, we may have some differences. But anyway, for the consistency with the theory, we are using the 15 through 64 as the economically active group. Alright, so this is the age dependency ratio, and the darker color. Darker color means there are more proportion of the younger generation under 14 years old or 65 years old. And we can see that many of the African countries, they would have the larger number of the age dependent one. So because they would have the very larger proportion of the children compared with the other countries. So you might see this kind of graph would be very, very complex, and you might be very afraid about that. But as I said, the proportion or the number of the people of this age, right? 0 through 14. So in this table, under 15, which means under 15 means 0 through 14. There were 63,731 people. Alright, so you can find this part in this information, and proportion or the number of people over, including and over 65. So 65 and older, 55,969, and you can add them up and divide it as 214,198. That part is here. So age dependency ratio is this number, right? Under 15 here, and the 65 and older divided by the 15 through 64 multiplied 100. So 55.88. So 55.88 will be the age dependency ratio of the United States in 2020. All right, so this is the way. So you may try to add up those numbers to find the number of the sum between 0 through 14, but you can use these kind of the key information to plug in these numbers in that calculation. So population by age group, the age 14, so the younger generation and the age below 15, and these groups will be decreasing. But the age 65, you can see that, and these are increasing more and more. So in this part, so as you can imagine, the older generation, they may live longer, and they might be economically or in the job market, they would be very active. But relatively, compared with the younger generation, such as it's 20 years old or 30 years old or even 40 years old, relatively the older generation may not be very effective in the job market in general, in average. So that's why the growing proportion of the elderly or the older population will be a kind of the challenge for every type of the countries. Alright, so age dependency ratio of the Japan is increasing more and more because of the older population. And we may go to the United States, right? United States. Okay, so the age dependency ratio is, as in these days, it is higher, but the United States would be also very high. Not higher than the Japan, but it also goes to the 80. So it will be very, very big. So the age dependency ratio, it does not only mean on only the younger generation or the older generation, but this is the combination, the combined version of the very dependent age group out of economically very, very active group from the 15 through 64. So the population pyramid is also featuring and visualizing the proportion of the age group by gender. For example, as I showed you in the beginning of the lecture, this is divided by as male or female, and based on the age, the 10, 20, 30, and on every 10-year interval, we can see the proportion of the groups by the year. So for example, this is the United States of America in 2020, and this is Nigeria in 2020. In same year, so in terms of the, regardless of the population size, these are the proportion. The proportion of the people within that age group by their gender as male and female. So we can see that out of 100 of the male, the 3.0% of the male population in the United States in 2020, the 3%, was 0 through 4 years old, compared with the 2.9 of the female population in that age group. However, in the same year, the Nigeria, 8.4% of the male population was 0 through 4 0 through 4 years old, compared with the 8.0 of the female population in Nigeria in 2020 in 0 through 4 years old. So compared with the United States, the Nigeria would have the very wider bottom compared with the United States. However, Nigeria would have very thin on the proportion of the older generation because of the development level, the economic growth, and the public policy and the aging level. So by comparing the population pyramid, we can compare the proportion of the age groups by gender by the country. So again, this calculation, this is the equation to calculate the age dependency ratio, but you can easily plug in those numbers in the calculation. But sometimes the using calculator would not be very intuitive and sometimes very hard. So I usually provide the Excel file so that you can use that as the very easy calculator. For example, the dependency ratio of the Nigeria in 2020. Let's divide it as a male and female, because it might be very complex if we make the total. So for example, for the male, so the male of the Nigeria 0 through 4 was 8.4, right? 8.4 out of 100, which is the percentage that was the male under 15 years. 5 through 9, 7.4% here, right? Plug in number here. 10 through 14, that is 6.4%. So if you add up those three groups as 0 through 4, 5 through 9, 10 through 14, that is 22.2. So the male population out of 100, 22.2% was the younger generation under 15 years old. In female, 8 here, right? 8 plus 7.1 plus 6.1 is 21.2. So we can see the under 15 years old male and the female population. So in the same way, over 65 years old, 65 through 69, 0.6, 0.4, 0.2, 0.1. If we add them up, 1.3 and 1.4 for the female. So you already found the numerator. So if you add up 22.2 plus 1.3, that will be the combined version or the sum of the under 15 years old and over 65 or 65 older than 65 of the male and female. All right. So in that case, these are the proportion. So if you need to add them up, so 20.22.2, 20.1.2, these are the younger generation. So younger generation here, the male and the female, and the older generation of the over 65 years old of the male and the female. So that is remainder, right? And these are the remainder. So out of the remainder of this part will be out of the 15 through 64, because out of 100, 0 through 14 and 65 plus, that will be this part of the age group. So based on this calculation of the 46.1, 53.9, so after that calculation, age dependency ratio of Nigeria was 85.5. So which is very high compared to many other countries. So in the United States, in the same way, 2.2, 2.3, 2.3, 1.9, 2.2, 2.2. So these are after that. So 65 through 99 or 100 plus, there are no people in the 100 plus. So based on the calculation, these are the numbers you can plug in. So in the same way, this is not South Korea. Sorry about that. This is typo. This is the United States. So 6.6 plus 6.3 of the female in the under 15 years old, and this part is 6.4 older generation, 8.7 or the generation of the female. These are the numerator of the P population 0 through 14, and the population is 65 plus, divided by 100 minus of the numerator, which is the remainder of the population. So after the calculation, 38.9, which means the age dependency ratio of the United, sorry about that. Oh, this is a typo. South Korea is 38.9, which is very, very smaller population. So based on the calculation, we can see that very different levels of the aging process. So in this part, these will be a little bit challenging. So based on this number, I usually in the quizzes or in the quiz, like a weekly quiz or others, I would try in this way. So on that calculation, so this age dependency ratio could be calculated as 38.87 plus, right, 0 through 7 and 14 plus 3.75. That will be numerator, divided by 57.38. That will be 74, multiplied by 100. That will be 74.29, which is the age dependency ratio, which are higher than other developed countries. So this is the way how to use those calculating process to calculate the age dependency ratio. Alright, so I will provide the more detailed versions of the Excel file or the other resources so that you can have the better understanding of the age dependency ratio. Alright, so these are the remainder part would be the very dry theory, so I will move faster than the previous slides. So the wealthiest quintile of the Malawi, which is also a very developing country, there are the smaller proportion of the younger generation compared with the poorest quintile. So within the same country, not only by among the different countries, within the same country, there are very big differentiations of the age structure. So that would be a very interesting topic we can consider in the further discussion of the other topics. So again, the P65 on the numerator, this part is a very, very big part of the aging process, because if we have the larger proportion of the older generation, it means that the aging process is very, very fast in that country. The larger dependent population, in terms of the ratio, there are the lower level of the economically productive people of the group, who are from 15 years old to 64 years old. Alright, so there will be many very keen levels of the debates whether having larger proportion of the elderly would be beneficial for the economics or not. There would be very different one, because in one part, the older generation, they would have very high levels of the professionality and the experiences based on their time spent in their occupation. Or in other side, in opposite, the older generation would not be very familiar with the new technology. And in these days, the technology, the paces of the development of the technologies are very fast. So older generation would be later. They would have the delayed on the processes of the understanding of the new technology. So the growing population of the older adults would be very challenging for many types of the countries. So percent of the US total population, we can see that the 85 and older, 65 and 64, 65 over 65. Anyway, we can see that there are the growing proportion of the older population. And the Social Security and the Medicare cost of the GDP, and as there are the more proportion of the elderly, which means that they are very dependent upon the Social Security or the social welfare system, we can see that the burden or the demand of the Social Security and the Medicare out of the taxation will be getting higher and higher. So, there are within the aging process, if the proportion of the elderly is below over 7, that is already aging society. But if it gets higher, it's aging society, and over 20% of the older population, over 20 of the population is older than 65 and 65 years old, and that will be super aged society. So let's see in the United States. Again, this is the United States, and if you go to relative, the Japan is a super aged society compared based on this criteria. So the United States, let's go that United States. All right. So United States has 16% or 17% of the population. So United States is aged society, but not super aged society yet. So we can compare those kind of the graphs based on the criteria. So percent of the elderly, you can try to use those tables, but you can try to simply use this kind of table, because I already calculated that. The sum of the 65 through 100 or more, which are the elderly group, there was 56,239 people in the United States. But all age groups out of 100, or the whole total population, that was 336,896. So the ratio will be 16.84. So which means that the younger, that is not the super aged society yet, but it's growing a lot. This is aged society. Alright, so this is the population pyramid of Angola. As we saw, the Nigeria, there were the larger proportion of the younger generation, but United States 2017, in another source of the World Bank, there are the larger proportion of the elderly or older generation compared with the Angola. So old age. So naturally, women are more likely to live longer based on the biological characteristics and their lifestyle and other types of the social phenomena. That's why we say the feminization of the old age, because of the survivability. The male older generations are more likely to die earlier than the woman generations or woman older adults. So that's why we say that there are the larger proportion of the elderly as the woman compared with the men. So there are many kinds of the decline in mortality or decline in fertility. These are combined together. So there will be the combined. So as I told you last time, the relationship between the population processes, that will be very important topic here again. So migration, if there are more in migration of the younger generation, the country might be getting younger compared with other countries. But the older generation comes to the United States more and more. The proportion of the elderly in the United States will be bigger, very naturally. So again, this is a very good graph, very good visualization. The population aging. The population is getting older and older combined with the macro level population aging and the individual level of aging as each person in the country. So they're all combined together. Social context of the aging and the age processes and the physical dependency, as I mentioned before, they would not be removable compared with the younger ages. I will show you another article describing about that. Economic dependency and the controls of the society resources. So based on the combined version of those social phenomena, the aging process, the age and the structure of the population, that will be a very important topic of the population studies. So the life expectancy and the low infant mortality, they are combined together. So all combined together, we can see that there are the more more and more older generations compared with the younger generation. The dependency ratio, again, a number of dependents or non-working age group as 0 through 14 or 65 and older, divided by the population age between 15 through 64. So that was the combined version. So adding up those and the dependent population, but we can divide it as youth dependency ratio, only including under 15 years old, divided by 15 through 64. So after calculating that apart, that will be the youth dependency ratio, which means the ratio of the youth population out of economically active group. So elderly dependency ratio is in opposite, only including the 65 and older, divided by 15 through 64 years old and 100. So selective migration matters again. So in the United States, the selective migration is very, very dynamic and very, very prominent phenomena, because many people, many of the talented people, or many of the very, very motivated people, they would try to come to the United States, such as what we say the brain draining, which means who are very highly educated in their original countries or their departing countries. They would be hired in the very good companies or very educationally very, very demanding the companies in the United States. It means that very highly qualified people, they would come to the United States as special migration or the professional migration. But they are not very always. We can say very, yes, partly, but based on the immigration, there are other types of the migrations. For example, before the COVID-19, many of the southern states, they had very temporal immigrant workers who would work on the labor intensive jobs. So after the COVID-19 or during the COVID-19, those types of the migrations or even the international migrations would be very, very, very controlled and very, very limited. But there are also these types of the migrations we can see. So we cannot say the migrations or the international migrations are always selective. But anyway, there are many chances to have the motivated immigrants in other places. So this is one scenario and one example. The New Zealand, they had the older generation, and they tried to accept the younger generations in their immigrants. But the structural migration, structural aging, that is also illogical. So we cannot say which one is the stronger, which is will be the best the solution. But anyway, the in-migrations of the younger generation might be one solution if the country suffers from the very high levels of the aging process. So this is one article from my friend about the immobility and their limitations of the daily activities based on the aging. For example, so the falling. So it might sound not very, very familiar for you, because you might be very young and you have very low chance of the falling down or slip down on the street, unless we have the very glassy or the very frozen on the road. But older generation, we can see that the 1 out of 4 for every year, and the falling down would be very, very serious. So even within the home, the falling down and this type of the injury will be very, very serious for the older generation. So for example, so let me show you that. So the younger generation, this kind of the road condition may not be very, very dangerous, because you are very active and you are physically very, very agile and very fast and very well prepared, so you can just easily jump down on that way. Or if there are some cracked road and if there are the rocks, you can simply go outside of that. We can even jump that. But for the elderly, for the older generation, those types of the road conditions would be very, very dangerous. So my friend, Dr. Lee, Professor Lee, he tried to make the analysis, but you don't need to see this graph because I made that summarization. So having some kind of unpaved road, the bad health condition, and the road condition, these were very, very highly related with the chances of the falling down, which means the very high risk of the health of the elderly generation. So other than that, on those types of the very good housing, I mean, on those levels of the social infrastructure, having the better road design and the transportation, and all the communicable on the ways that would help a lot of the older adults out of the chances of the falling down, which will ruin their health conditions. All right, so these are all of the lecture of the topic of the age and the population structure. So that's it, and I will share another video to describe, no, not the video, another page to describe how to prepare the quiz effectively. All right, so thank you very much for your attention, and see you in the next video of the topic of sex and the population structure.